Now, welcome to our rolling coverage of the 2024 U.S. presidential elections. With hours left until polls begin to close, some battleground states are already reporting high voter turnout despite threats apparently aimed at disrupting voting. Now, Michigan, Wisconsin and Georgia have allegedly received suspected Russian-sourced threats.
Votes out here. Talk to voters. Caroline? Carolyn? Hi, Carolyn. It's Kamala. Hi, how are you?
To get us the latest, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from New York. Also on the broadcast is John Christopher Bua from Washington, D.C. He is a political analyst and also White House correspondent, Real Political News. Both of you, welcome to the broadcast. All right, Susan, if I could quickly start with you. There are reports of exceptionally high voter turnout in Philadelphia, and Donald Trump has claimed that there's massive cheating at play already.
Yeah, massive turnout indeed in not only Philadelphia, but in Pennsylvania as well. We've really seen these early numbers be very impressive. Of course, they're a lot lower than they were in 2020. 2020 was a COVID year. It might have been an outlier in many ways, but we saw early voting numbers not only in Pennsylvania, but also across the United States where Americans really took to the polls. But then also today on official voting day, we're seeing a record number of people go to the polls as well. Not only in Philadelphia, but here in New York City as well. The lines were pretty long in the afternoon, which was very surprising because New Yorkers are usually known to vote early. Nonetheless, what this shows is that so much is at stake for so many Americans. And, you know, they want their voices heard. This vote means a lot to them. As for Donald Trump making those claims, there's been some reports of issues with voting machines in Pennsylvania. I haven't heard his direct quote, but I know that those issues appear to have been resolved right now.
Right. John, come in here. Issues with voting machines is one thing, but calling it blatant cheating is another. And this comes just a couple of hours after, when Donald Trump said that he will concede if he thinks the elections are fair. Your thoughts?
Is this a question for me?
Yes, John, please go on.
Oh, my thoughts. I'm not at all surprised. Donald Trump can pull any skullduggery rabbit out of a hat. He's done it before. He'll do it again. He'll start on it now. He'll start his rant. It's cheated. I got cheated out of everything. You know, he's setting the stage so he can then protest it. And this is really not very good to say these kinds of things before the polls have closed. There's a real legal issue about that. But legality is something Donald Trump doesn't really bear in mind.
All right, Susan, what are you hearing about the polls closing anytime soon? What can we expect from the battleground states?
Yeah, from the battleground state, we do know that polls will be closing very soon. In about an hour or so from now, those important states, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Texas. 7 p.m. is Georgia and Virginia. 7:30 p.m. is North Carolina and Ohio. And then, you know, by 8 p.m. we have Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Of course, we here in New York are going to go all the way to 9 p.m. as well. But we'll be getting, you know, those are important voting blocks. Of course, they're those important swing states that we've been covering so much. But then by 6 p.m. Eastern, you do have a number of states that they have their polls closed already.
Right. John Christopher, if I could come back to you, taking your point a little further, elections at this scale tend to be demanding in respect to the candidates. One cannot be policy heavy or personality heavy. There has to be a good mix is what we have understood. Do you think the two candidates have been able to achieve that?
Well, I think Kamala Harris had a big surge and a real boost when Joe Biden selflessly handed over to her months ago now. And she's come back and she's talking about policy issues. She's talking about what she's going to do for the American people. And Donald Trump, unfortunately, is using his own chance of skullduggery by telling the American people what he's going to do to them while cursing and using profanity against the candidates, against Kamala Harris, against Nancy Pelosi. It's really very frightening and scary, and it shows what kind of a leader he would be again if we had another 4 years of him. And he only gets worried and only starts to complain when he feels like he's losing. And I've known him for 60 years, and this is the kind of individual he is. And stand by, because he's going to protest. He's going to probably declare it was an illegal vote, and there's going to be a lot more in store from him over the next few days.
Right, I hear what you're saying, John, but then the truth of the matter is the opinion polls show that there is a neck-and-neck race. There is like 50% of the electoral in United States is supporting Donald Trump. Then why is that the case?
Well, that's the case because, first of all, the only poll that matters is the poll that's going to come up when all these votes are counted. And I think there's a sliver of voters who are undecided. There are some real strong Republicans like Liz Cheney, who believe in the Republican ethic, like Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan and the Bushes, who believe in this country can have a conservative leadership and they can get along. We need a two-party system in this country. And if Donald Trump and his acolytes, or I would call them his disciples, his MAGA disciples, who deify him, by the way, if they take it away from the Republicans, they're not going to go for him. And I think that's where he will lose. And of course, the young vote is enthusiastic. And the people of color, the people who don't like racism, his snide remarks about Kamala Harris, I won't even get into those veiled comments about her ethnicity. It's tragic. It's not what America is about.
Right, 2 points there. There is also a longtime Democrat, RFK Jr., who has endorsed Donald Trump and is supporting Donald Trump vehemently. And the other thing that you said about the non-white voters, we are seeing increasing polls that suggest that black men, in fact, Hispanic men, they're actually in support of Donald Trump.
Oh, no, they don't. Not after that Madison Square Garden debacle, where his hired comedian likened Puerto Rico to an island of garbage in the sea. That didn't do very well, and Trump didn't disavow that. In fact, he piled on that, and here's what happens. He doesn't know who his audience is. He knows he has his disciples, and he can say anything because they have deified him. But the people who are really listening, the people who really care, the youth of America who believe in the future of America, like I did when I supported Bobby Kennedy and John F. Kennedy and Bill Clinton, who I worked for, they're saying, wait a second, this guy, aside from the fact that he's saying horrific things, he doesn't look very good, and he's a nasty son of a gun. And people don't want that in America. They don't want nasty. They want someone who embraces them, who can help them, who cares about them. And I think that's why Kamala Harris will do well.
Right, let's talk about another demographic. Susan, if I would like you to come in quickly. We have talked about this before, that women in America do support Donald Trump. We have to know if that's the majority or not, but they do. And one of the reasons that is because women in America are not one-issue-centric voters. They are multi-issue-centric voters. So while there are abortion rights and reproductive rights in the discussions, but there are other things, which is economy, inflation, and cost of living, that also cater to the women voters. So have you heard some things on these lines when you have spoken to the women voters?
Yeah, absolutely. And time after time, and it's interesting because there's a woman on the ballot, but time after time, surrogates for Kamala Harris have decided to undermine women who back Donald Trump or who vote for Donald Trump or who are surrounding Donald Trump. So it's very interesting how the women that vote Republican are often being undermined. But what is a fact, and we can't deny, at least according to polls, is there is a huge gender gap when it comes to the two candidates. Women are overwhelmingly voting for Kamala Harris a lot more than they are for Donald Trump. And while they're not one issue voters per se, but the Dobbs decision, the Roe v. Wade, the issue of abortion and women's rights has really resonated with many generation of women in the United States. Not only the younger generation who are worried about their future, but then you have an older generation that really had to fight for their rights just because they were women, and it's resonating with them as well. But nonetheless, you know, it'll be interesting to see ultimately which way the women of the United States decide to vote. They are a very important voting bloc. They're not one-issue voters, as I mentioned, but it seems that the message of Kamala Harris has resonated a lot more with women in this country this round of elections.
Right. John Christopher, this is where I feel you should come in and we should have a discussion, because there is this one section of the women voters who we are calling as paradoxical voters, who basically they might be in favor of abortion and reproductive rights, but that's only on the state level. When it comes to national elections, they are willing to support Donald Trump because of his economic policies, because they think that Kamala Harris doesn't have any economic policies, at least she's not sure about. In fact, I would like to explain that through a quote. I spoke to a Republican woman in Arizona, and she said this, and I'm quoting, "I want to afford a house. I'm not looking to date Donald Trump." Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, the women's rights are being taken away. Women are dying outside clinics because the terrible rule laws that are in place, for example, in states like Texas, and Trump wants to go. Trump said, "I want women who get abortions to be punished." This is what he said. That is unbelievable. It is frightening. And to allow this man to get another term in office, I can only imagine the power that he has over the people who would vote for him. And this is going to expand globally. I mean, when you think about what Joe Biden did with NATO and how he got Sweden and Finland involved to fight Putin, who would love to see this election fall to pieces, because you know he's very close to Donald Trump. This is a big issue. This is not just one issue. And women are the heart of this country, and they will take this vote, and they will take this election, and they will show victory for what is right in America. And that is women's rights are human rights, and I am happy to support powerful women. I married one, my mother was one, my granny was one, and I think women are the future, just like in 2008 when Barack Obama, a man of color, a black man, was elected president. It was one of my proudest days, and I just am excited about the concept of the first woman president, who happens to be of Indian American descent and also of African American descent. What a powerful message America is showing the world.
All right, John Christopher, then let me ask you this. Do you think America is ready for a U.S. president to be a woman?
I think now is the time. Now is the time. This is showing all this angst and all this anxiety and all these conflicts are showing that nothing happens. Nothing. We win nothing if we don't struggle and fight through it. And I think we can fight through this, and we can win for America, and we can win for our allies like India and our allies in Europe. And I think the world will be a better place.
All right, on that note, I'll have to wrap up. John Christopher, as well as Susan, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast and getting us all those insights.
Pleasure.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.